CEO of ISS Group. I am joined by my colleague, Frank Salisi, who is the Vice President of R&D. I will be handing the controls over to Frank to do the actual demonstration of the software. But before we do that, we're going to do a brief overview. So I'm going to take a few minutes. I know nobody is thrilled about going through PowerPoint slides, but we think it's important just to give a brief overview of what you're going to see today. So that'll take no more than 5 to 10 minutes. I'll then hand the controls over to Frank. He will do the actual demonstration of the software. That'll take about 20 to 25 minutes. We did leave time for Q&A at the end, about 5 to 10 minutes. And then if there is time at the end and everybody is still awake, we can circle back around and we have a couple more slides just on ISS Group if anyone's interested in who we are, if you don't already know who we are. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. This is an important slide. We started this presentation with this slide. We wanted everybody to understand we've been in the QAD community for a long time, since 1995. So 20 years now. We have relationships with lots of different partners in the QAD community, Logan Consulting being one of them. Some of you may have heard of Logan Consulting. And we went to Logan and we asked them, what is probably the #1 business process that you see your clients struggling with during an implementation of QAD? And they sat back and they thought about it, and they came back to us and they said, we think it's the setting up of a new item. So they identified a few different processes within the implementation, but they felt this was the #1 process. So we said, okay, that's terrific. Can you design the process for us? And then what we'll do is we'll take our I approve solution, which of course we're going to talk about and show you today, and we will implement your design within our solution. And so that's how it worked. So Logan is a management consulting firm and a QAD implementation partner since 1992, and they're the folks that actually did the design of this solution that you're going to see today. These are probably the top 3 objectives of the solution. The first one is to organize and streamline the task of actually creating the item in QAD. So Logan came back to us and said, hey, to create an item in QAD is a challenging task. There are many different screens, depending whether it's a purchased item or a manufactured item. So maybe what we need to do here is organize that task, especially if it's being done by multiple people throughout the organization, and streamline the task. So that's the first objective that we tried to accomplish. The second one was to provide automated control. So as I just said, if there are multiple people that are part of the process in creating a new item, you need control over that process. Now, right now, if you don't have automated control, you may need a consulting firm like Logan Consulting, actually making sure that the different people around the organization do what they need to do to get that item set up. And again, if it's a manufactured item, there's a bunch more screens, the cost roll-up screens, the product structure screens, etc. And Frank is going to talk about those different screens today that need to all be filled out in order to get that item set up in QAD. So again, if you're part of that process already, if you're in the supply chain or the IT departments or the purchasing department in your organization, you know what I'm talking about. It's a challenging task to get those items set up. And we're talking about one item, never mind 1,000 items. And if an item has multiple components to it and subcomponents to it, the task becomes even more challenging. And then the third objective, last but not least, was to improve the process by combining QAD functionality already being used. So we weren't looking to replace the QAD maintenance screens. That was not our goal. Okay? If you're already using, which I'm sure you are, if you're using QAD and you're setting up items in QAD, clearly you're already using the QAD maintenance screens. Our goal was not to replace those screens. It was to leverage the use of those screens by combining our rules-based workflow technology and what we call a centralized item data query center with those maintenance screens to improve the process, not replace the process. That's very, very important. Okay, we are our business is developing add-on solutions for QAD, not replacing functionality in QAD. Okay, so that's very, very important, and we'll talk more about that. So this is one of the data flow diagrams that Logan put together. There are actually two of them here. This is one. This is the second one. Obviously, one feeds into the other. We're not going to go through this in detail. It's not critically important that you can see the small print in each one of those boxes. What is important is that you can see this is a data flow diagram that requires multiple departments within an organization to participate in the process. Now, this may not be the same as your organization's process. Your organization may not have the finance department involved in setting up an item. Okay? This is just the way Logan designed it. Our workflow technology allows the routing however you configure it. And you configure it based on the data in the item. So this is just an example of a workflow setting up an item for a particular client that Logan has. And this is the way this client set up or created a new item. From the start, submitting the new item request, and Frank is going to show you that, then going to finance doing the initial approval, right? Then going to engineering. And then what you see here is a multi-path flow. So it's not only sequential from here to here to here, but then from here, it splits, and it goes to two different departments at the same time. And then again, it happens here. So that's one of the reasons why we showed this slide here, is to show just an example of a data flow. It may not at all match your data flow. It doesn't need to match your data flow. The routing is not a static routing inside this tool. It's a configured routing. You configure it, the end user organization. There's no programming required. We provide a rules configurator where you set up those routing rules, okay, and based on the data of the item, and again, Frank will show you that, it will route to the different people within your organization. What you also see here at the bottom is the system that's being used. So you see here, I approve, and that's the tool that we're going to be talking about today, is used to submit the initial item request. It's also used to fill out the initial item data. But then, as I said earlier, we're leveraging QAD. We did not replace QAD screens. So you see, we send instructions out to the appropriate people in engineering, in this case, to go into menu option 1.4.1 and fill out the rest of the item master data. Once the rest of that item master data is filled out in QAD, you would hit the continue or approve button in I approve, and it would move along the workflow process. Okay? And you see the different screens, 1.4.16, 1.17, et cetera, within QAD. So that's what we talked about here, combining the QAD functionality already being used by you, and that's what this is reflecting here. Okay, so that's very, very important to understand. Okay, and this is just the back end of it. In this case, the design calls for a final approval. So the last person in the hierarchy or the routing was a person that would use the query functionality, and that's why we have a whole bunch of query functionality, to make sure that all the data that was supposed to be set up in all of these different screens, cost roll-up, product structure, routing maintenance, etc., was set up properly. If it wasn't, this person has the privilege or the authority to send it back to somebody within the routing, to anybody, to this stage or to this stage, with instructions on, hey, you missed something, fill this out, please, and this person would get it, or these people would get it, and they would hit the continue or approve button, and then it would go back to this person. Any person in the workflow can send it back based on security privileges. So that's a security configuration setting. You don't have to allow the ability to send it back, but you can allow the ability to send it back. And in this case, you have a final person actually reviewing it's all set up properly before that item and its components, if it's a manufactured item, is made active in QAD. Okay. We only have 2 more slides here, and then we're going to hand it over to Frank. This is just a picture of some of the clients that we have using our technology. We have a number of solutions, which I'm going to show you on the next slide. So you may recognize some of these customers. Again, we've been in the QAD community for 20 years now. We have provided solutions and services to over 300 QAD end users throughout the globe. So you may recognize some of these names. And last but not least, this is a list of our current released solutions. Today we're going to be looking at iApprove, which is what we call our request routing and workflow or business process management solution. So this is the solution we're going to be looking at, and very specifically, we're going to be looking at the new item setup and inquiry functionality that was developed using our iApprove tool. Okay, so Frank, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to let you show some software.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, my screen should be coming up in your monitors in just a second or two. We'll just wait for that. Okay, everyone should be looking at a blue and white screen. Hopefully it fits on your monitor. If not, there should be a button within GoToMeeting where you can go full screen and see all 4 edges. I've gone ahead and logged in as myself, Frank, and I've gone into the item setup and inquiry screen. So that's the screen we're looking at here. Now, before I get into the details, I just want to explain what we're looking at and all these different components that are being shown to you. On the left-hand side, we have our menu. This menu is based on user security, so you can give privileges to any menu item granularly at the user level or user group level. So not every user will see the item maintenance screen unless you decide that you want that. Okay, so that's our menu. In the top-hand section, we have a tabbed interface. We have about 10 to 12 different tabs up here. I'm currently sitting on the first tab that shows my base item data. And I'm going to walk through the rest of these during the demonstration to show you what they are. Down at the bottom, we have a listing of all of the new item requests that have been entered into the system, along with their status. So we see some are not submitted, some are pending, a couple are approved. So we'll see all the items that have been requested so far and what their disposition is, just at a glance. And we can search. There's a very powerful searching capability down here where you can find those items that you're looking for really easily. I'm not going to demonstrate that today, but you can filter this list to look for items based on status or that were entered by a particular user or that need to be approved or were approved by a particular user or stuff within a product line. You can find that information very, very quickly. Okay? So that's our screen. And what I'd like to do is to start off by putting in a request for a new item and then walking that through the process. Okay, so we start off by clicking on the new button here. And what this does is it clears out the screen and it's ready for input of a new item data. So now I like to use the current time, which is 12:45 on the nose, as my item number. That usually ends up being unique for me. So we'll create a new item, and the item number is going to be 1245. Okay. These boxes here that are in red with the asterisk at the end are the mandatory fields. So in order for me to complete this request, I need to fill in only this left-hand column. There's other data, but I don't have to fill that in. Someone else down the line is going to do that for me. I only need to fill in what's in red here. So the other 3 pieces are unit of measure, and then a description. And I'm not very good with descriptions, so we'll just put description 1 and description 2. Right? We're only prompting for the required information that QAD needs to create an item master record. Okay? We're not looking to prompt for everything it needs, but only the required information. Right? So far, I've only filled in half of that. We also are going to require this, but I'm going to leave that to someone else. I'm going to save this. Okay, so now what we'll see here is that I have a new request that's currently not submitted. It tells me who requested it and what the date and time of that request is. Now, along with this request, this may be an item which has a bill of materials, and maybe we're using mostly same existing items as components, but maybe this item also requires a couple of new components that we don't yet buy or make. So we have another screen that we can go into, which is tied to the base screen, where we can list any new components that are also needed for this base item. So I clicked on the Add New Component button right behind there, and it brings up another screen that looks very similar to the first. And again, my item number is going to be 1245-1, and I'll just do description component 1, and we'll do description component 2. All right, so I'm creating a component now that is going to be requested. And then I'm going to copy this and create a second one, 1245-2. Right? And we'll save this copy as well. So I've created two components, 1245-1 and 1245-2. And I've only filled out that limited amount of information, the item number, unit of measure, and description fields. At this point, my request is complete, okay? And I will submit it for approval by hitting that submit button here on the right. Now, when I submitted, what happened was the status was changed to pending, all right? And all of the fields are now locked down. So you have the ability to lock them down when it's in the pending state. That's the configuration option. And you also have the ability to say, hey, even though it's pending, I want these users, and you list out who these are as part of the configuration. Those users will have the ability to actually modify the request while it's pending. Okay, so the approvers or the workflow process members can modify this data as needed as they're going through and completing the process. I'm going to log in as my first approver or process member, which happens to be Glenn, who is a member of the finance group. Okay? So before I mention that the menu is security driven, Glenn only has access to certain functionalities, where before we were logged in as Frank, who's an administrator, and Frank has access to everything. So I went ahead, clicked on the new item screen, and it brought me to that last used item, the one that was just entered, and it's showing me here this new item request. Okay, I have the ability to approve, reject, and send back. And we're going to talk about this email in a moment that just showed up. But what I did not mention earlier was that we have the ability to enter notes and attachments. So I neglected doing that before. Let me do that now. You can enter notes or documents. You can attach documents to the request as well. So I can have something like, if there was a reason behind this, please see the attached document for justification, okay? And then we can go ahead and pick a file. And here's a PDF file. We'll go ahead and save that. Okay, so it's now added that note. Please see attached document. It's added the document. I can click on this and it will open up in Adobe. And it also date and time stamps who entered the note and when. If I have a second note, it will also give me a sequential listing here in descending timeline order of these notes. And so every single request can have documents attached to them. Okay, so now as the approver, we're going to jump into my email here. It's not the right one. When I'm an approver, I'll receive an email. Okay, and this is an example of the email that was sent out to 2 different people, both members of the finance group. What we have here are links to view, approve, and reject. So we can view, approve, and reject directly from the email. But more importantly, we have the instructions, okay? So these instructions here are going to guide your process members through the process of creating an item. What do I need to do with this data? Well, we're telling you what to do. You're going to review and complete the base item data, okay? So this is an example, and this is completely configurable by you. Your instructions are relevant to your company's business process. So you would type in what you want your approvers to see, okay? But they are given the instructions, and we also list out the actual data. So here's my base item along with the 2 components that were created or requested, and we show you who's requested, the request date, and who's gone through the process so far. So we're at the finance group so far, status pending. We've got a couple more members to go through before this will become live in QAD, but right now we're at the first stage. Okay, so I can use these buttons here, which I'm going to do as my second approval in just a moment. All right, so back to the screen. The instructions called for reviewing and completing the base item data. So we'll also show you the same instructions here on the screen. And that the instructions that were in the email also get shown to the user on the screen if they were to go into this record. All right, so we have to complete this right side. Okay. Now blanks, because blanks are in QAD and blanks are valid, then blanks are allowed. If blanks were not valid in your configuration, then they would have to pick a different product line, for example. Okay, so blanks are allowed on some of these fields in QAD, so they're also allowed in I purchased. This data that we're looking at here in these drop-down fields is coming directly out of QAD. So we're not replicating data. These are your product lines that are defined in QAD. These are your sites that are defined in QAD. We're reading the QAD data directly. This is a complete 100% progress application, same as QAD. So we have the exact same rights or privileges or technology that QAD does as far as accessing data. I've gone ahead and filled out this right side. I'm going to save that. Before I can actually approve it, I also have to do the same for these components. So rather than doing one at a time, I'm going to select both of them. And we have a little pencil here, which is our batch edit that allows me to modify multiple records at once. So I'm going to modify both of these. I'll just set the site to 10,000. We'll change the product line to software, and we'll save that. And you'll see now the product line was changed and the site was changed on both of those components. Okay, so that part of it is handled in I purchased. This initial base item data is handled in I purchased. The rest of the process is going to be handled in QAD. All right, so once I click approve here, what happens is those 3 items have been loaded automatically into QAD. All right, all of this information is now in your QAD item master database. All right, so we handle that part of it. The rest of it, the setting up of the item site planning and the inventory and the product structure and all that, is going to be handled directly in QAD. We only handle the initial item creation of this data. What we also do is we set the status of the item to some type of restricted status, and you guys would configure what status you want. But basically, it's not yet active. Okay, the items are in the system, but they are not yet active. Okay, so they can't be used on sales orders and POs. Now, another email just came to my second approvers. Okay, and this email says here, this is to Bob Dalt, we need Bob to modify the item master attributes in 1.4.1. Okay, now, the rest of the email is exactly the same. It's the same item we're looking at. What's changed is now that finance has approved and we've moved on to engineering to go ahead and modify 1.4.1. So as Bob Dalt, what I would do next is I would switch to my QAD window, go into 1.4.1. I'd bring up these items and I'd configure whatever data I would need to configure, based on your company's rules and requirements in QAD. Right? I would do that in QAD. Once I'm finished doing that, I'd come back here into this email and I would go ahead and click approve. Okay? And now, typically, when I log in the first time, I would check this box here, keep me logged in, and it would never ask me to log in again. Okay? But because I'm always switching users for demos and for development, I don't hit this box. But typically, you would not, when you click on that email, you would not see this screen at all because you're already logged in. Okay? You would be taken right to this screen here that says successfully approved. All right? So from the email, I can go ahead and approve my steps, or my step in the process. I don't even have to go into the application. Okay? So now if I'm going to go back in, so just because I want to show you what happened. We've gone through, I manually logged in as Glenn and I approved, and then I approved as Bob via the email functionality. The green little circles here identify the status of the approval. So green means approved, yellow means pending. Right now, we only have 3 steps in the process. And the reason why we only have 3 steps is because our subsequent steps are all based on whether the items that are being created are either purchased or manufactured. And because I did not go into QAD and set that purchase manufacturer flag to a P, an M, or a C, then I only have these 3 members. If I were to go in and set P or an M, then additional people will be dynamically inserted here at the end to now route this request to engineering to set up a product structure, if we have something manufactured. Route it to finance to do a cost roll-up, okay? So based on whether it's a purchase or manufactured item, the I approve here would take different paths as far as who else is needed. Currently, we only need supply chain to go in there to, I just clicked on the little instruction button to do these instructions, 1.4.16, 1.4.17. Once that's finished, this item would get set to active. Okay, but if I were to switch to a P or an M during those screens, 1.4.16 or 1.4.17, then additional people would be added to the routing of this request. All right, so we're going to route to people when they're needed, not all the time. Okay, if they're not needed, we're not going to send it to them. If they are needed, we will send it to them, and they will be added and removed dynamically as data changes in QAD. Okay, I'm not going to walk through the final approval, but the only thing that would happen differently was that once Paul Doyle here approves, the item would get sent to an active status. Okay, just to talk a little bit about what you're looking at here, this is the approval history screen, and I should have maybe did this earlier. But the approval history screen shows us who has approved, who needs to approve, what is the entire routing that's required for this request. All right, and we see here a finance group, an engineering group, and a supply chain group. We also have some members. Glenn and Kelly are members of the finance group. We see a sailboat next to Glenn. That means Glenn's on vacation, and Scott Carpenter is filling in for Glenn while he's away. So Scott will get all emails that get sent to Glenn, and then Scott can come into the system and do the work. Okay? When we have a group, we only require one member of that group to approve. So we don't need Glenn and Kelly to approve. We only need one or the other to approve. Okay? Same with here. There's another group, and supply chain happens to also be a group. Andy mentioned earlier about simultaneous versus multipath, or sequential versus multipath. This routing that you currently see in front of you is sequential. The sequence here identifies when the process members get to approve. So for example, if engineering were to reject this request, supply chain would never see it, because supply chain only sees it after engineering approves. Right? This number here is what tracks that. If these were both 200, so if this was a 200 versus a 300, then after finance approved, it would have gone to both parties at the same time. and supply chain may have done their work before engineering did, and that's totally okay. Right? It's completely based on how you set up your approval structure. All right, so that's the new item maintenance. Like Andy mentioned earlier, we're not trying to replace it, but we're trying to manage the process. We'll kickstart you by getting you to enter the base item data within here in iApprove, and we'll create that base item data in QAD automatically. The rest of the process is handled in QAD and iApprove. We still require you to approve stuff once you say you're finished. We do require you to come into iApprove or just click on the link in the email to tell us that you're finished so we can move it on to the next person in line. When you do click approve, we actually do check to make sure that you did what you said you did or what you needed to do. So as an example, the supply chain group here, Paul Doyle, his instructions are to enter the data in 1416 and 1417. But when Paul goes and approves this request, we will actually go check the data in QAD to make sure that Paul did what he was supposed to do. And if he didn't, we'll bring up a little alert box like this saying, hey, Paul, it looks like you didn't enter the item site data. Are you sure you want to move this along? And then it's up to Paul to say, yes, move it along. Oh, darn it, I forgot to put it in. Let me go put it in now. All right, so they can't just blindly approve. We will double check that they enter the data in to QAD. Okay? Now, as part of this process, we also have these other tabs that we haven't looked at yet. These other tabs are used to review other data that's in QAD that's pertinent to this process. Right, so before I show this to you, I'm going to go ahead. Right now, it's only showing me the one record that I'm working on. I'm going to go ahead and reset this screen so that we can see all the different requests, so I can get a request that has some good data in it. So here, 10-10,000. I'm looking at my item site planning data for item 10-10,000 and site 10,000. Right, so I only had this one record set up. This is all the data that's in QAD that's pertaining to item site planning. Okay? I could switch tabs here and I could see my item site inventory data, again, for that same item. And here I have two different sites defined, 10,000 and 12,000. But we're bringing that data right to you at one click, as opposed to having to go into QAD and bring up these different screens, search for that data separately on all different screens. We have that all here in one place. You only have to search once, and it will show you all that data you're looking for. All right, so here's another example, product structure. Item cost. So we have our costing data for that item. If we have any customer cross-reference records, we show that. Any supplier cross-reference records, our routing operations. Okay, and we also show you inventory transactions. So these are all the inventory transactions that have hit 10-10,000. And we talked about searching before. We can search, as an example, show me where my order is equal to 1006. Okay, and it would show me 1006, the inventory transactions against this sales order. Okay, I can also do something like show me all of my receipts. I think that's RCTPO. Sorry, that item doesn't have any receipts, but I'm going to switch to a different item. All right, so these are all the receipts for item 22100. So as I switch items up here, so as I key in some data, it'll bring me a list of all the matches that are in QAD. All right, so I can pick an item, and it'll now show me the receipts for that item. Now, once I search, all of the other tabs are now using this new item. Okay, so once I put in a new item up here, all of the other tabs will now pick that up and show me the data that's based on that item. Okay? And I can reset that. Excuse me. And we'll go back to the item that we have selected down here. And I think that is going to conclude the demonstration portion. So Andy, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Terrific, Frank. Thank you. Okay. We still have some time here. Before we go through, we have 3 or 4 more slides if anyone's interested. But before we do that, if there's any questions, please feel free to type in your questions in the GoToMeeting dialog box on the right-hand side of your screen. Happy to answer any questions that you have. I don't know if we can open up the microphones for people to actually ask the question.
Muted.
So I'm not even going to try to do that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them right in. All right. While you're doing that, let me just go through these handful of slides. Again, there's only about 3 or 4 slides here. As I mentioned earlier, we've been in the QAD community for a long time. We've been in business for about 27, 28 years now. We were a reseller for QAD from 95 to 2000, and we actually worked with QAD back in the mid-90s to create QAD's first e-commerce application called MFG Pro on the Web Trading Partner Transactions. That e-commerce application is still being used today by companies like Eaton and Tyco and John Crane. So obviously it's been upgraded many times since 1996, but they're still using that to this day. So we're very, very familiar with the QAD software. That's where we developed the first what we call integration points or APIs to QAD, and that's what allowed us to develop our suite of solutions today. So as Frank said, we are real-time integrated with QAD. We do not replicate data. The data is maintained in QAD and read in real time. As I said earlier, we've provided solutions and services to over 300 QAD user organizations, and the business we're in is providing business process improvement solutions to the QAD community. As I said, we're real-time integrated with QAD. All of our solutions are 100% web-based. They use the same technology as QAD, as Frank mentioned, which is Progress. The user interface is jQuery. So it's 100% web-based solutions. All you need is a browser for anytime, anywhere access. We do offer both one-time licensing as well as subscription pricing for our solutions. Because our solutions are 100% web-based, they lend themselves to mobile and tablet functionality out of the box. We are integrated with Microsoft technology, email, Excel, calendar, and Link for presence and chat. And we have clients that scale anywhere from a few users to hundreds and hundreds of users. The primary objective of our solutions, as you saw today, is to improve the flow and control of specific business processes which require a review and approval activity prior to performing an action. Today's action is creating an item, but our other solutions like iPurchase may be creating a purchase order in QAD, or our iQuote solution creating a sales order in QAD, or a CapEx request, or a project, all in QAD. And here are some of the results that have been achieved by our clients. This comes directly out of the mouths of our clients. Global process standardization, reduced process cycle time. As an example, Abbott Laboratories, using our iPurchase solution, told us that they reduced their PO requisition to PO creation cycle time from 2 weeks to under 2 days after the implementation of our iPurchase solution. Significant reduction in process cycle time. Improved process visibility and tracking, elimination of redundant data entry, et cetera, et cetera. Real value. So if you have any additional questions or you need any additional information about us, please feel free to visit our website at www.issgroup.com, or feel free to contact me directly at aweinstein@issgroup.com or .net. Either one will work. And once again, we thank you so much for attending today. We know everybody has busy schedules, and we do appreciate you taking the time to attend our webinar today.